Welcome to the StraitData podcast series with another episode in the transportation topic. The transportation podcast where I go over just news about the industry, trends in the U.S., and just my insights and perspective. A lot of times I'll be covering transit data as that comes out, but in between I'll just pick a news story here and there to go over. And today, I have a story that is related to the coronavirus, but it is more of a positive story, more of a story of the ingenuity and making the best of the situation. And I guess I'll focus on Florida because these headlines are coming out the strongest, although I've seen this in California as well, where the governor is ordering the Department of Transportation of Florida to accelerate roadway construction projects during this stay-at-home order time, I guess you could call it, where people are not going to work nearly as much. People are not using the roadways, rush hour. The roadways are not congested like they typically are. And so, thus, the construction contractors and people who work for the state can leave lanes closed. I guess is the premise behind the order and behind the acceleration of the construction, is that the construction crews can leave lanes closed that typically they would have to only work, in the middle of the night or during off-peak. And during peak hours, they would have to let those lanes back open, so they would have to pull back and not be able to do their full extent of their work because they have to let the lanes open to traffic. Whereas now, since the traffic demand just isn't as great, they can close more lanes and work on more stuff at one time. And, I think this is a really cool story. I mean, we talked about this on this Short End of the Pick podcast that, this is a use of ingenuity. Not ingenuity, it's just a good thought, a clever thought. Why not take advantage of, some of the negative impacts of the virus that translate into something like less traffic on the roads, and use that for our benefit as far as a planning and construction effort. Now, what this really helps is, it helps the ratio. It helps, when they do open up the highways, or when they open up jobs and people start traveling back to work, these roads will have already been accelerated. And there will be less time with full traffic on the road that they'll be fighting over or competing for the roadways with the construction crews. Anytime that construction is happening, and you've got normal traffic patterns, it's painful. It causes displeasure in the temporary, because the whole point is we've got to do the work now so that long term the traffic congestion won't be as bad, because whatever construction we're doing, most likely it's for increasing the flow, increasing the capacity of the roadway, whether it's widening or some other clever reconfiguration of the geometric design. So the whole point behind big roadway construction projects is, you have to slow down traffic temporarily because you have to do the work. Now, if you just throw your hands up and say, no, we won't accept slowing down traffic at all, well, then you can never work on the road and make it better. So the traffic will just keep growing and growing as population grows and as changes in travel patterns happen. But, you're never going to, your roadway is always going to have the same capacity and the same issues holding back the capacity to carry traffic. So the thought is, you make an investment. And there's a monetary investment, obviously. You pay, a lot of cases, some of these mega projects that, like I'm going to talk about, you're going to pay hundreds of millions of dollars, if not tens of millions of dollars. And that's a lot of cash. We're talking billions. I mean, I looked it up just because I should actually know this, but I looked it up. The Florida Department of Transportation budget for 2020 for the work program is $10 billion. I think that's just for the work program, but I don't know. That could just be for the entire department, which would include, all the other overhead or overhead workers and planners and everything else, not just for the construction. But anyway, I'm pretty sure the work program budget is on the order of $10 billion. So we're talking about a lot of investment in the here and now. But also, the investment takes place in the form of traffic congestion. I mean, you've got to slow traffic down today for a 2-year period or 4-year period. Some people complain because it ends up taking 6 years when they said it would only take 2 years. But in the next couple years, in the next few years, you've got to struggle with trying to get all the traffic that needs to get through, but also closing down lanes. And having these construction slowdowns so that, when the construction is over for 20 years, this road can carry tons more traffic, and, people don't necessarily think that far ahead. They don't see the sort of the investment and the cost benefit as they're struggling, as they're sitting in their car stuck in traffic. But, when you've worked on the planning side of these things, you can look out 40 years, 25 years. These are the planning horizons that the decisions are made. And so that is part of construction, roadway construction, especially on these big projects. Now, I'm going to read through the headline here. So this is Governor DeSantis, quote, wanted to make the most of the light traffic by speeding up roadway construction. And it's $2.1 billion in roadway projects, which really kind of confirms my $10 billion understanding of the work program. He pointed out projects that added up to $2.1 billion to get sped up across the state. Now, this is in all sorts of different districts. And Governor DeSantis said, I think that there's an opportunity to take advantage of that. We have the roads that, if you were to do a lot of construction on, would cause massive traffic congestion in normal circumstances. That may not be the case now. And he's exactly right. I mean, if you have a 2-month period where the traffic is at 30% of what it normally is, you have a vast ability to speed up these projects and to mitigate that upfront cost. I mean, because like I said, part of the cost of of roadway construction, it's not just the materials and the labor and the construction itself, but it's also part of the cost is time and traffic congestion caused in the here and now. And if you can avoid part of that, if not a good chunk, maybe a good chunk of that, then you save a lot of the cost, the societal cost of doing these projects, and you lower the upfront cost while keeping the benefits, the long-term benefits, the same. So it's a really, it is a really good idea. Of course, I want to give credit to the Transportation Secretary, Kevin Tebal, and he was probably really involved with this. And obviously, there's lots of kinks that they need to work through, because when you plan to drop hundreds of millions, billions of dollars on projects in the matter of months, it's a complicated thing to just speed up the schedule. I mean, it's a lot easier said than done, and that's part of what I'm going to talk about. But I'm trying to go over some of these points in this article. This is from Sun Sentinel. Of course, they have to really be careful. They're saying, we got to be really safe about the construction workers. Obviously, this is going to require them to do a lot more work and to stay on the job instead of going home like everyone else. And so there are these workers like truck drivers and, postal workers and grocery store. They can't just go home. They've got to do the essential work. And now the construction workers, they're lumping that. I mean, because if you said, heck, let's just push back the work program and treat these workers, the construction workers, like everyone else, and we don't want to spread the disease among them either, then, you're going to have a lot of delays in construction progress. But if you treat them like an essential worker, and of course you got to put the safety protocols in place so that they, because these guys are out in the sun sweating, they're probably in close proximity a lot of the times. I don't know, construction workers. I've never worked construction. I see construction sometimes happening, but you're touching all sorts of equipment. You're, operating machinery, and yeah, I mean, I think that machines make it a little easier than maybe 100 years ago, when construction workers were probably even more numerous and in tight quarters with each other while working. But All that to say, they're saying, of course, we need to focus on the safety involved with keeping these operations moving. So the projects in Florida that I see here, let me see if I can read through them. Advancing 4 weeks for project involving I-395 and I-95 in Miami-Dade County. Advancing 3 months of widening Southern Boulevard in Palm Beach County. So those are in Southeast Florida. You've also got a Key West bridge project advancing by 1 week. 4 weeks on the Howard Franklin Bridge project in Hillsborough, Pinellas counties in Tampa Bay, over Tampa Bay. They've been working on that, I know, in conjunction with the whole, I don't know what they're actually calling it, the expressway project in Pinellas County that's going to connect to that. That bridge is coming up on its term, and they've been planning and starting construction on that over the last couple of years. So accelerating that by 4 weeks is huge. That's nearly $1 billion project. Moving up 4 to 6 weeks on the I-Drive and Universal Boulevard in Orlando project. Moving 2 weeks on I-75 and State Road 70 in Manatee County, I think, in Sarasota area. Advancing 4 weeks on paving and widening on State Road 951 in Southern Collier, down in Southwest Florida. And we've also got 23rd Street flyover project at the intersection of US 98 in Bay County, and diverging diamond interchange in Nassau County, I think, up in Jacksonville area. So all that to say, that's a lot of projects. And like I said, those projects total to be $2.1 billion. That doesn't mean that we're fast forwarding the pipeline of the work program by $2.1 billion. That would be extreme. That's not what this is saying. This is saying that all those projects total span cost add up to 2.1. So we might be speeding up, a few weeks in the blip of that for projects that may take 4, 5, 6 years. And I also saw something about the huge I-4 project is going to be they're going to be doing a lot more work on that. That I think that at one point was one of the biggest projects in all of the U.S. The I-4 reconstruction, that's been just ridiculous amount of work up there, or down there, depending on where you're at. So I guess all that to say is, you look at the 2.1 billion and, you might be able to speed up, a little blip on that scale of those projects. We're talking, in a lot of these cases, they think they can speed it up by a month or so. And it makes sense because, if people are off the road for 2-3 months, you've got all this time to work with, you can operate day and night, or, peak and off peak. And this has a lot of implications. I just think immediately, like, you're going to need a lot more man hours right here and now. I mean, so you're going to need to hire people. And so I don't know if this was the intention of the governor and the state. And by the way, I'm focusing on Florida, but I've heard reports of this in California. I actually didn't see much of it elsewhere. I think there was a question in one of President Trump's press conferences about that being done in the D.C. area. But this likely is happening all over the country. I don't know every story in every state, but this discussion kind of applies to all of that, which is, if you're going to accelerate roadwork projects, you're going to need to hire. You're going to need to have man hours operating during times when you otherwise would not have them operating. I mean, the whole point is you used to have to open lanes up and therefore not work as much during certain times of the day, whereas now you think you can work during the off-peak times and the peak times, and so you're adding in a ton more hours where you can do work. But if you have the same number of workers and the same amount of equipment and machinery, then you're not going to be able, you can't just wave a magic wand and have the road appear all of a sudden, just because you have all this extra time that you can close down, the main line lanes with. You need more workers. And I don't know if this is part of the strategy. I mean, there's a lot of people that don't have a job right now, but how many people are really qualified to do roadway construction? I mean, how many construction workers? I mean, I don't know. I mean, construction workers are typically not revered as the most skilled people in the world, but I think there is, in today's age especially, a lot of skill that's involved in being a construction worker. And I think in general, construction workers, especially on these major road projects, are pretty well paid and pretty, have really good benefits and are probably really skilled. I mean, you can't just walk. You can't just go from, working at you can't just go from working at an airline, and because they've shut down, you got laid off, or a hotel, and just walk onto a construction site. Especially, if you're of a certain physique or a certain, I mean, maybe men can do it a lot more able than women, but that's besides the point. I guess the point is, yeah, you do have a ton of people that are off of work, but can they just walk onto a construction site? I mean, you have to know all the safety protocols to do this. So what? Are they going to make all the current workers, are they going to make them work overtime and just pay them for working double shifts? What if they don't want to? I mean, you might have a labor issue brewing up here. And I guess they're confident they can do it. I don't know. I mean, maybe if you pay people to work double shifts, the people that do have jobs, they might be thankful that they still have a job, but they might not be willing to work double shifts. Whereas there's a lot of people who would be happy to take 2 jobs right now over no jobs. And it doesn't really matter how many hours they have to work. But there is a lot of logistical issues here in the labor market, I can imagine. And also, I think that this is an issue for the pipeline in general. Because if you're the state of Florida and you're paying for, I don't really have a good estimate. I mean, let's just say all the work, the accelerated work, that is work that you got done during these 3 months or 2 months that you otherwise would not have been able to do, and therefore you've sped up the project, so to speak. If all that work equates to, let's just throw out a number, $100 million, okay? Or, something that's going to be taxing, something significant. Let's say it's $200 million, right? That's a lot of money that you've had to pay the construction companies and the workers and everyone who's involved in working these extra hours, because you can't just have a road speed up its progress without having extra workers and working extra hours. You know what I mean? So all this pay has to come out of the state budget. So and then what happens once everyone gets back to normal work? I mean, all the construction workers, you're not going to lay them off to make up for the time that you gained when they were working extra hours during the stay-at-home period. So they're going to stay on the books, the ones that were working before this all started. I'm not saying if they picked up extra people, yeah, they can lay those off. But all the people who are normally working, they're going to have to go back to normal rate of work. And so the state's going to have to pick up back where, when everything gets back to normal, they're going to have to pick back up and pay the people what they were expected to be paid during that period as well, moving forward to the end of the year. So what happens when you speed up the pipeline like that is right here and now, you have to shell out more money than you expected to. I mean, it's a budgetary issue. Obviously, they have clearance from the governor and from the secretary to pay out this extra money. But where is that money really coming from? I mean, tax receipts are going to be way down from what from what you planned it to be. But what you're going to make up for it with spending extra money? You're going to, what you think you can stimulate? I mean, maybe they think that they can stimulate the economy by hiring, replacing people who were working in other fields look at the Florida's economy. It's all based off of, well, not all, but a lot of it is based off of tourism. Who's visiting Florida now? I mean, the state of Florida got hit in one of the worst periods. I mean, March is one of the busiest times for tourism in Florida. I mean, this happening in the middle of March is probably, right through March in April, is probably the worst case scenario for the tourist industry. We're talking, Spirit Airlines is based out of Florida. So you're talking like airline workers, you're talking hotel workers. Think of all the hotels on the beaches where the workers just have nothing to do, so they're getting laid off. So yeah, you can try to replace them and put them into construction jobs if that's possible, if that's feasible. I don't think it is, like I said earlier. But if you put them in construction jobs and now that's going to keep your tax receipts up. So you're going to pay people for jobs that you didn't plan on having. And then collect. I mean, you're basically trading dollars for quarters at that point. So I guess my question is, where in the state budget is this money going to come from to fast forward? I mean, I could understand keeping your obligations of your work program. Knowing that you're going to have fewer tax receipts, it might actually make sense to slow down your production. Tell the construction workers, look, I know we had this. The thing is that a lot of these contracts have already been signed. So if they were to work at the normal rate, according to the contract, it's not like the state could just tell the companies that have these big contracts, oh, we're not going to pay you. These guys are going to go out and do the work as long as the money's coming through, and that's a commitment that the department already made. But to the extent that the department can fudge with the contract, because apparently they're able to fudge it to get more money into the hands of the companies that have the contracts through accelerating the projects. To that extent, you might ought to slow things down, knowing your state budget, your state income revenues are not going to be as much this year. So the big question, where is the money going to come from? And people have to think of this. If you speed up the pipeline, yes, you save the cost, the societal cost, but you don't save the budgetary cost. You actually increase the budgetary cost for the year. So the people are getting a good deal. The people of Florida will be getting a good deal out of this. And I'm not saying that it's bad in that regard, because they're going to get back, there's going to be a sooner time when that project is going to be done, and they're going to have freer flow on the roadways. I'm not saying it's going to be right when this is all over. They're not saying that all these projects are going to be done by June or July or whenever the stay-at-home order lifts. They're not saying these projects are going to be done by then. They're just saying we're accelerating. During this period, we can accelerate the progress by 4 weeks, which means at the end of this project, which, some of these projects, they might be scheduled to be finished in mid-2021 or mid-2022 or early 2022. Who knows? But let's say a project was scheduled to be done in August of 2021. Well, now it's scheduled to be done in July of 2021 because they sped up the project by a week. I mean, that's what that really means. So it's a benefit to the people in that in July, the roadway is going to open up and be free flow instead of in August. So people are going to get one more month of enjoyment. But the budgetary cost is what you have to pay for the materials and labor. And that's also part of it. And if you speed things up, what you're saying is we're dumping more investment. We're trading off. We're paying a little bit extra in cash to provide that additional benefit to the people. And so that whole dynamic is a really complicated one, I think. And the government never seems to shy away from cutting spending during economic downturns. I mean, they always resort to more spending, which I don't want to turn this into a business podcast, but it doesn't really make much sense to spend more, unless you're a Keynesian, unless you believe that Keynesianism works. I don't really know when it's been tried and it has worked, but people still cling to it like it's gospel. Like the government spends more money during an economic downturn, and thus, somehow that heals the economy. When what the government needs to do is cut back and lower restrictions and collect less taxes and spend less so that people have more money in their pockets to be able to spend. But and no, not more money in their pockets to spend because the government sent them a check. That's not accomplishing the same thing. It leaves money in the people who naturally have it through market reasons. And it comes at the expense of the people that are getting bailed out and these construction workers who might get paid 2-3 times what they normally would in order to accelerate the progress. So the government tends to get involved and try to spurn the economy. And that's at the state level as well as the federal level. I love talking about this on the state level because, it's a breath of fresh air to talk state politics, but the state has a $10 billion budget, at least the state of Florida. It's a large state, but it's a huge budget. And so, where are you going to get this extra $100 million, $200 million from? I mean, you already weren't going to be able to make the commitment that you promised, which was the 2.1 or the, however much, $700 million that these projects were going to consume this year, or the 2.1 billion total. Now you're going to push more money into that. I guess what it also means, if you look at this logically, if we accelerate it now, it's money that we don't have to pay later in time. And so would you rather not pay money later in time or not pay money today? And so that's another part of the discussion. But, in the here and now, in the painful season, where are we going to get the money from? Yeah, it's going to save us money, for at the tail end of all these projects. When all these projects come to their completion stage, they're going to come 1 month early, and it's going to be 1 month that we're not going to have. But like I said again, what are you going to do? You're going to lay off the construction workers for a month there? No, you're just going to push everything else that you were going to do. And going back to my example, what you were going to start in August, because now that project is over and now you can start something new. What you were going to start then, you're just going to start in July. So it doesn't really reduce, it doesn't really make itself back up, because the government's never going to, the state DOT is never going to just take a hiatus of, okay, well, we finished it a month early, so now we're going to take a month, everyone's going to take a month off. Well, no, now how are those construction workers going to feed their families? That doesn't make any sense. Everything's just going to get sucked backward, and it just creates a work program issue and a pipeline issue. Like I said, this is going to be a short one. That's pretty much all I have to say. I raised my concern. I mentioned the projects that are going to be affected here. It does make DeSantis look really smart, makes him look efficient. This is what an efficient leader does, what a good leader does, I think. Looking for innovative ways to take, there's a lot of negatives that the coronavirus is creating, right? But why not, while the negatives are creating their negative impacts, we can take those and mitigate. We can add, okay, well, the virus dumped all this weight on the bad side of the scale. And, because of it, we can take a couple nuggets and put them on the good side, and at least make the problem a little bit worse. Now, like I said, there's some issues here. I mean, how much positives is this really adding? Well, I guess in a schedule sense, it's definitely positive. In a budgetary sense, it's kind of an issue. It's not necessarily a positive at all. And then in the short term, how are you going to accomplish this? It's really easy to say, hey, well, the roads, there's less traffic on the road, so let's close down the lanes more and speed up the progress. Let's speed up the projects here. It's really easy to say that, but it's hard to find the workers, where they had been scheduled to work from such and such time during such and such time, and you've only got so many people in the workforce, in the construction workforce here. So what are you going to do? Where are you going to get the workers from? So that creates a logistics concern as well. And maybe some other smart guy, maybe T-Ball and the Department of Transportation can figure that out, have some good minds on it, and hopefully it all works out for the better, as in it does actually take some pain away from this situation, and it creates a positive outcome. Hey, the road work is accelerated. So with that, I don't really have much else to say on this topic. It was a little interesting. I hope people one takeaway out of this is keep up on your local issues, and even in this subject of transportation, like I go over national trends in transit, and it's hard for me to dive into all the different localities. But I mean, these things are going on the state-by-state level. So especially in transportation, like this is obviously there's a federal Department of Transportation, but so much of this stuff is decided on a state level. You really do have to look at it state by state. And this is a good example of a governor stepping up, a Department of Transportation stepping up and trying to do something creative. So with that, this has been another episode of StraitData Transportation Podcast. If you like the content, if you want to hear monthly transit data, trends reviews, and other stories like this one, and you like my reviews of this stuff, please subscribe, please give me a like, and with that, I'll catch you guys on the next one.